Do you think that Brazilian Zouk is an accessible dance style? Do you think that the way we teach makes it easy and welcoming for everyone to learn? And what are the things that makes it the hardest for people to join the dance? Well, let's find out. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Zouk Nerds. In this episode, we're going to be talking very seriously about the things that we believe that makes this dance not accessible and how we can transform the way we teach and the way we interact with this dance to make a dance that is adaptable and can welcome more people into the community. So, let's go! Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode. My name is Alisson Sandi, and today we have our beautiful co-host here once again, Gui Prada. Hello, Gui.
Hello, everybody. Good day to everyone, and welcome back.
So let's get started with this new episode. And today we're going to be talking about body types for Brazilian Zouk. What difference does it make for different body types in terms of learning, connection, or even ability to do any movements from any level? So when we talk about body types, we're talking about various different things. So we're talking about flexibility, we're talking about height, we're talking about size, we are talking about mobility. So many things that influences how we dance, how we move on a daily basis. And as you can see, Brazilian Zouk does challenge our body in various different ways that maybe other dances doesn't. So let's talk about maybe the first one, flexibility, which is something that we find that a lot of people feel a little bit insecure about when they're learning Zouk, especially for the followers. Neck flexibility, spine flexibility, or even shoulder flexibility, because there's some movements that you're like tangling and pretzeling yourself. So Keith, what are the most common things that you find when you're either social dancing or in private lessons, group lessons, that you find that you have to cover, or questions that people ask?
I adapted my dance a lot over the years to really cater to, let's say, the general public. So doing things that I know it's going to be easy on the body of most people. One thing that I found that I realized that might be an issue for some people, which is when we do any sort of wrapping around like yo-yo or cuddle, depending on body size, depending on height, depending on age and flexibility, this you're putting the arms around your own body can be a thing. So sometimes we adapt to around the neck or wrapping lower on the waistline, or sometimes realizing halfway through the wrapping that the wrapping is not going to happen. So releasing it and letting it become a turn instead of a wrap. And the cambres and the chicotes, sort of also adapting my leading to let the follower do the cambre and the chicote to the extent that they can do. So almost like leading just the beginning of it and let them all the way to the end. Because I realized that sometimes the followers see the more experienced than the teachers can do with their bodies. And by the natural process of mirroring and imitation, wanting to do the same. So they seek for bendiness that their bodies can actually do. And to seek that bendiness, they start to compensate in all these other ways, and sometimes forcing their body to achieve the looks of what they think is the depth of a cambre or the depth of a chicote. So now I'm doing more of like an indirect approach where I lead the beginning and let them all the way through the end. And in classes, this is something that we highlight as much as we can, because even when we're doing from the mirror small, the cambre and the chicote, whatever sort of back tilts that we have, even the side tilts in head motion, even though we do like a little bit just to show that it's not a matter of flexibility of the neck, but more of tilt of the torso. Even in that case, we notice people trying to forcing the heads to the side to reach that level of flexibility. So the eyes can be deceiving as well. So as a teacher, realizing that we actually need sometimes to go there touch people's bodies and position the body in the place that is more than enough so they can, so this is it, this is here. Because people might not have the body awareness, not enough body awareness to notice how deep they are bending, you know? So as a teacher and as a more experienced social dancer, inviting people to do stuff smaller, much smaller, and explaining over and over again, and as many times as possible, that what they see in the demos and the videos of Brazilian Zouk, they see like a performance version of what a cambre can be, of what a chicote can be. So I think that will be it, Alisson, for me at first. The wrappings and the chicote and the cambre. What is it that you notice in your side over there?
When I look at this topic, for me, the first thing that comes to mind is what you mentioned, which is adaptability. That's really all that we want to cover in any class, in any movement, in terms of how to do each and every movement in Brazilian Zouk. Because the other aspect of it is each body's ability and flexibility, mobility, strength. So not only we have to adapt to our partner, but we also have to adapt the movement to our body. So some people are more flexible in their lower back or mid back or upper back or even the neck. Other people have very flexible shoulders. So every time that we're teaching, every time that we're social dancing, we need to be aware of that. And also have the tools to explain to the student on how to adapt that movement. One tip that I would give to anybody who is looking for either improving their mobility or understanding how to help other people adapt movements, for example, teachers and assistants and people who have dance partners that are helping out each other, is to go to a physical professional. So somebody like a physiotherapist or some doctor of the body, because that's what I've done forever. For as long as I've started dancing and I had the means to go to a doctor, I would take videos of our social dancing or the shows, the movements, and ask them, what do you see here? What problems do you see here? What things do you see here that we can do better? And how to prevent injury in these movements? That's a major, major thing. It's kind of like being an athlete and having a coach for your body, not just a coach for your running and technique and everything, but a coach that will look after your own body, not your connection and your grounding or things like that, which most of the times your dance teacher will do. So those are the aspects that I look into, adaptability, personal mobility and flexibility. And the last one that I would mention is actually the evolution of the dance. When you look at the very, very, very old days of lambada, you'd see videos of people with or without the body mobility and flexibility doing things that, we look at it and we're like, wow, it hurts to watch. I'm sure it didn't hurt in the moment because they were having fun. They were warmed up. They had the energy in the body just making them happy. I'm sure of it. I'm not saying that it was a bad thing in that moment, but knowing what we know now, we know that those things wear your body way faster than the ways that we know now. And then when Zouk went into the slower, the more stretchy and ballet type and the influences from contemporary and all of that, there was a lot of cambres, but sometimes they were lower, sometimes they were not. But either way, there were more extreme shapes, I would say. Extreme shapes of arm connection, extreme shapes of legs, and even lines and extensions and things like that. And then it kind of also, I would say, limited the reach of who is this dance for. But in the late years now, in the last maybe 5 years plus, I've seen a lot of changes that I think are really, really good for the dance. One of the changes, I think, it's really talking about the safety, talking about adaptability, And also talking about how, especially when you're doing head motions, head movements, it's all about the ability that you can do in a comfortable way without forcing, without overstretching, without having to squeeze muscles. I remember from many, many years ago, maybe some would call it old school technique. You know, you have to squeeze your core, you have to squeeze your butt, you have to squeeze this, squeeze that, squeeze this, squeeze that. And for many years, I did what I was told. That's what I did. But then I learned through classes and through coaches that for me, when I squeeze, I actually get hurt more because I have less recovery, less adaptability, less mobility within the movement. So I don't know, for years now, I don't even talk about squeezing muscles. I talk about engaging muscles or being aware of those muscles groups or feeling the energy in those muscles, but not necessarily squeezing to a point of like locking to make sure that nothing moves. And I think I just went like pinball in like 10 different directions, because that's exactly how my brain is right now when it comes to what have we done over the last 20 years to teach this dance, to dance this dance, and to learn this dance when it comes to body types or body abilities. It's a lot. So I'll pass this to Guy now.
No, it is a lot. I was listening to you speaking, especially when you talked about taking the dance videos to a doctor or a physical therapist or something like that. And I actually, this can backfire actually, because I know a couple of followers that they were actually feeling pain in their necks or their backs or something like that. And they took videos of them dancing to their doctors, and they looked and they were horrified. They're like, what the hell are you doing? So actually, if they were to follow their doctor's recommendation or their physical therapist, they would completely stop. They're like, you stop this right now. I have actually one friend that she developed something in her ear. So there's like these little crystals in your ear. Didn't know about this. They're responsible for your balance. And hers were a little messed up. So the doctor asked, you cannot turn or spin in any way. You know, like, so he said, if you're gonna go dance this dance, you have to specifically ask your partner, do not turn me, do not spin me. She couldn't go around, as simple as that. And another one who had a car accident and she was recovering and she wanted to go back to dancing. And she asked the doctor, can I go back? And then he said, okay, what dance are we talking about? Brazilian Zouk. Don't know what you're talking about. Show me videos. And then showed videos and he was like, nope, you cannot go back. Do something else. Do some tango. Do something that you're upright. You know, is there a dance that you can do that you don't? And then she ended up doing some bachata, but asking people not to turn her too much, not to do any head movements. So depending on the situation of the body, if you show it to a doctor, they might tell you, nope. But there are some, and I know we have actually physical therapists in our body of students. Yeah. And actually here in Taiwan, actually there's a lot of doctors and they'll probably know really well what to do in order to prevent injury and to prevent, stuffing happening. I, for example, was having a lot of back pain. And then I realized when I was in this very intense back pain, because of like 6 straight days of social dancing like crazy. Small body movements, small undulations were hurting my back. So then I realized that I needed to dance upright as much as I could. As a leader, it's a lot easier for me to choose to stay upright, and also realizing how much I'm conditioned to undulate my body. I realized I was doing undulations by default, and it was actually a very interesting way to understand and bring more awareness to my body to try to stay straight longer. So then I think of the followers, that sometimes the followers ask the leaders, look, I have a pain here, like my neck, but the leaders still go ahead and do the things. And I think Brazilian Zouk, and maybe all the other dances too, has still a lot of work to do in what comes to adaptation. The leaders adapting to the followers according to their request, their specific verbal request, and also adapting to noticing people's flexibility, noticing people's range of motion, not trying to make things deeper, not trying to make things more bendy. And I remember one time in one class, there was an older lady in class, and one of our assistants saying that she was not doing the cambres. And I asked, well, she's not doing the cambre, but I did with her. And then the assistant said, oh, but she's just coming out, she's just doing this. And then I said, exactly, that's her cambre, you know? So sometimes even the instructors, even the people teaching might associate cambre and other things with a specific amount of bend. So if you associate that way, you might be excluding a whole bunch of people from the dance. So just like being mindful of that, just being mindful that the movements we do are not attached to a very specific shape, but they are more attached to a set of principles and movements that you do with your body is characteristic of that pattern of that movement, but not necessarily a specific size or a specific flexibility. Yeah, so you're talking about the early days. And here I'm gonna maybe use like a harsh word and be maybe slightly more critic. But I don't care. It's Sunday. We are tired.
Oh, yeah.
But I think sometimes we go through very paradoxical moments. Brazilian Zouk, in the way that I started to learn, was very mindfully designed to make lambada more accessible. It was fast. This we're talking about, I started dancing in 2006. So we're talking about early 2000s, late 90s, lambada was still a thing, mid to late 90s. So they were wanting to make lambada more accessible in the schools in Rio. So I'm here talking about Rio. And they introduced the slowdowns, they introduced larger, slower motions with the torso, introduced elements of ballet, contemporary, and they introduced those elements to make lambada more accessible. So then it seems that over time, because of the things that Zouk was doing then in 2006, 2007, where the cambres were super low, like Alisson was saying, the chicotes like, wow, everything started to be strong again. So what was an effort to make something more accessible became inaccessible in its own. And nowadays, noticing how much the technique in what we see in the reference points in the videos involves fast motion, explosions, fast cambres, head motions, sometimes double, triple head motions inside the head motion. Then as much as we talk about what is safe, as much as we talk about only this is a cambre, no, this is enough for the head movement, we can talk so much about this. But if in the end, all of what we see in the media is the complete opposite of that, I don't think it's going to work. We can keep saying, but I think it's going to work in our pool of students. Our pool of students going to know, and sometimes we might need to constantly remind them because we will tell them things and then they don't see us for like a couple months because they go and live their lives and stuff. But then everything starts to get influenced again by what they're watching. And then they go back to us and we need to tell them again. So one friend of mine who also teaches, sometimes she expressed a lot of frustration saying that sometimes like rowing against the tide, because every time you need to say, no, this is fine for a cambre. And then again, no, this is fine for a cambre. So I think we live this weird paradox. We don't see what we say, What we say is enough. We don't see that in display. We don't see this little in display enough times for those who are watching over and over again to start creating in their mind the connections that, yes, this is enough, this is okay, So then I think we unawarely or unintentionally create a view of the dance that is hard to access for other body types, other ages, flexibility, range of motion, all of that thing. So I finish here my venting. Thank you so much for listening, for watching. Venting. But when it comes to this matter of making the dance or whether or not the dance is accessible for different body types, I feel a lot of things about it, mostly because how much and how often me and you too, Alisson, we are around learning how to dance Zouk from zero, from scratch, in the basic levels, in the boot camps, stuff like that. Yeah.
I think one of the most important things that we as teachers and community leaders need to be aware is of how the dance fits the community that you have, or the dance fits the community that you want to have as you build it. For me, my primary goal is to build and have a community that everybody feels that they can do the dance. I'm not saying every single movement, but I'm saying that they can feel that they can dance. So even when I'm teaching and designing curriculum, I will always think about, okay, how many students can do this? Well, a few students can do it, then it's not good enough to be in the course. I want to teach movements and techniques that will give them the fun and the experience and the feeling of Brazilian Zouk in a way that the most people in the community can do. And yes, occasionally we're going to teach something that is a little bit above, but we're still going to teach version A, version B, and version C, which means they will be able to do the movement in a version A of cambres, and then version B of cambres that goes a little lower, and version C of cambres. So it's never like, this is cambres. If you don't go that low, you're not doing it. There's always the gentle version, the mid version, and the high intensity version, if you think about it. Even when I'm teaching spins, there's like the spin, which is just a little one, come back. And then there is this spin where we do multiple. And then there's this spin where we do multiple and we have different body shapes. So everything that we teach can be done by almost everybody. Almost everybody. We just need to study to understand the principles, to understand the minimum requirement version to be called that movement, and then teach our students that and then grow from that. Because it's not just about body mobility, but sometimes you're just tired. So as a follower, how do you dance when you're tired without getting hurt? Well, if you've done the classes where the teachers taught you how to do the gentle version, the mid version, and the high intensity version, you'll be able to go back to your library and go like, okay, there's a gentle version of head movement, a gentle version of cambres, a gentle version of chicote, a gentle version of maybe counterbalance even, and do those. So the gentle version of head movement, when you're using as high as possible in your spine, so you're not going from like the middle of your spine or from like your shoulder line, you're just going from the very, very top and keeping it gentle. The gentle version of cambres, pretty much the same thing. The gentle version of counterbalance, just don't counterbalance. Stay on your axis. So the leader may be asking for a counterbalance. You can give them the connection of counterbalance per se, but you don't have to like hang yourself into that counterbalance. And in that case, you're not blocking the movements unless you want to block. But I'm saying like, if you want to continue doing the things, but in a low impact mode, that's still possible. And if you don't know that, please reach out to your teachers or reach out to other teachers, any teacher, and ask them, how can I do this in a low impact or gentle way? Like I said, it could be because you're tired. It could be because you're hurt. It could just be because you're working towards something, whichever that is. You know, going back to my performing days and competition days, we would always ask the entire team to not do any crazy sports or crazy adventures for the 3 months before the actual show competition. In Brazil, I was part of a dance company, and the teachers would be very specific to the men and say, no soccer with friends on Sunday, because you're always going to break something on the week of the competition. And guess what? They would not play for maybe 2 months. And then on the week of the event, they're like, oh, it's fine, you know, like we're almost there. Nothing's going to happen. And then always somebody breaks something or injures something very badly. And then we have to redo the entire show. But coming back from that detour and going back into the ways that we can learn to adapt, please understand the technique and the mechanics in your body. But as well, understand that the way that the teacher is teaching you maybe some pretzels. And pretzels goes into more like shoulder mobility or even arm length. Some followers have very long arms. Some followers have shorter arms. And a lot of the times they feel like they cannot do the movements. Or leaders also have longer or shorter arms, longer and shorter torso and legs. Understand or ask the teacher at the end of the class if you feel like maybe in the middle of the class is not a good time. Hey, my body is like this. How can I lead that, or how can I follow that based on the principle of this movement? This Wednesday, I was teaching a class and one of the students is short, and he was asking me because he was not being able to reach all the followers within the arm positions and the things that the movement needed. And he said, well, you can just grab the back of the arm. You don't have to grab like all the way to the back of the back and the shoulder blade. If you can create the same feeling and the same principle of the mechanic, you can touch the shoulder, you can touch the back. Sometimes you can touch parts of the arm. Sometimes you can touch the side of the hips. There are many ways for you to create the same movement and execute the same movement based on adaptation of technique, understanding different body types and body abilities. So please do some research on that.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because when we are teaching, we consider our height, we consider our body type, so we can reach certain places, right? So it's very good for us when the students come and ask about the specifics. It's very interesting now that you're saying that, Alisson, because it's a lot more often to hear questions about adaptations when someone is really tall. When someone is really tall, we often ask, oh, but what if the tall people, what do we do? We don't hear so much when someone is shorter or other body types. So it's nice for us when we hear these questions, understanding, of course, that for some people might be really difficult to acknowledge that their body type or their height or their flexibility is not allowing them to do exactly like we are doing, and asking for tips on adaptation. Totally understandable, that part. So in that case, for example, it would be nice for us to after the class, for example, asking, what is it can I do to make this more comfortable for me? And many times it's exactly like Alisson was saying. Instead of a hand all the way in the shoulder blade, it's slide to the arm, and then we are good to go. Instead of the connection on the torso, it's gonna be a little lower on the belly. All of these things, because in the end of the day, what we are wanting to achieve mostly is comfort and ease of execution. So sometimes by trying to do exactly like we are doing, the execution becomes uncomfortable. And so it's simple like that. So I think that's a very good reminder, Alisson, for these specific cases when we are in class, And for the social dancing, for the jungle, I think it will be interesting for us to start maybe separating our moments in the social. For example, beginning of the social, when the social is packed, and when we are dancing with space, with someone we know. Like my contact prof teacher say, is someone with an able body, in the sense that is someone that can do the things that you can also do, in the way that you do, in the size that you do, with the dynamics that you do. And that's something really interesting that my teachers were they were masters of. You would watch them social dancing, and they would adapt their social dancing so much to all the circumstances. Who they're dancing with, how much space they have, what time of the social it is, and basically the overall mood of the social. So there will be like a tuning in the general vibe. It's almost like you see like a sea of people moving in a more or less similar pace. Of course, everybody with their interpretation, their musicality, but you wouldn't see, for example, in a calm, chill song, one person going too crazy with the leg going up, with the head swinging around too much. They would leave it for when they had space. And I think that would be something that could be beneficial for us when we talk about welcoming all body types, all flexibilities, all ranges of motion, to be attuned to all of these elements and observe them all when we're social dancing, to really create a more welcoming and democratic environment for Brazilian Zouk. And I think this comes to what we mentioned in one of the episodes, the difference between a social and a party.
Yeah.
Where we have the social, the aspect of gathering, the aspect of socializing, and the aspect of welcoming as many people as possible, and having more like this chill, informal gathering kind of vibe that I think is so nice. Yeah, so I think this would be interesting to implement in my dreams. And then coming back to the episode of the dreams, if we could snap our fingers and make something happen, I think I would make that happen as well.
Yeah, that's something that I've been working with my team here in Taipei over the last month or so, where we did some exercises on adaptability. And I think this exercise that I'm going to mention really fits into what we're talking here on how to do things when the bodies don't match or the abilities don't match. So if you have a training partner or if you're a teacher, try this with your students. Try to dance with limitations. So for example, now everybody on this side of the room, and you're all going to dance to the other side of the room, close hold only. And it's not a race, but I want you to be efficient. I don't want you to take 10 minutes, but I don't want you to take like 3 steps and just run there. And here's the catch, only with continuous timing. So tum, chick, chick, all the way across the floor. And then next time, only open hold. The other time, only right hand with right hand with left hand, vice versa, only crossing arms, only touching the shoulders, only touching the hips, and introduce this all the way. And the students were like so challenged, but at the same time so inspired, because they started realizing that what they know just multiplied by 10 times. So they know bonus, but now they had to do bonus with a different hand combination. And then they knew viradinha, but now they could only do viradinha with one hand. So they had to do viradinha with one hand and then lateral with one hand and enter soltinho. So the choice of hands and frame and all of those things, kind of, they felt like they just learned a bunch of new movements. And for the followers, it really taught them what's important in each movement and what makes each movement. Because it's like, oh, we're doing bonus. Okay, my right hand, follower's left hand, turn down the line. No, that's one way of bonus. You could do bonus in so many ways. And in that moment, you could see that some of the followers were glitching because they were like, but is this still bonus? Is this still bonus? Or is this still soltinho when the hands are crossed? And we're like, yes, guys. Look at the essence of the movement. Look at the principles of the movement. Then you understand. And this, in turn, fits really well with this topic of being able to dance and to do movements, adapting to what happens in the moment, maybe due to body abilities or body type. If I'm starting a movement and then suddenly the 2-hand hold is not going to work, I'm going to try to continue with one holding hand and the other one maybe holding the shoulder or maybe touching the hip or something that is, respectful and safe to touch. And sometimes when the students ask us that question in class, they're like, I cannot reach. And we're like, okay, try to connect to the arm. And they just look at us like, but am I allowed? Is that possible? Is it still the movement? Isn't it wrong? And we're like, no. I mean, like, the movement's still happening. Thinking about dance as a language, we're still saying the same thing by the end of the sentence, but maybe with a slightly different accent. The sentence is complete, the communication is clear, and the message is sent and received well. As long as that happens, we're good to go. So I think when we're talking about this topic of body types and all of that, in the end of the day, it's not yes or no, right or wrong, but it's more about learning the tools to know how to adapt within your body and adapt to your partner whenever necessary, because it's social dancing. Social dancing is like he's saying, like it's jungle, bro. There's no trail, there's no warning signs. It's just jungle and survival sometimes, but in a good way, in a fun way.
Yes, a fun jungle. 100%.
Fun jungle. It's a jungle full
Like
of magic crystals and magic butterflies and magic trees and lots of magic in the jungle.
And magic creatures.
Oh dear. Yes.
When Alisson was mentioning, when you say, yeah, you can touch the arm, and the student goes, is it allowed? It reminded me that now I'm specifically talking about the shuffling of the feet whenever you feel that you're about to lose balance. It's something that I started saying expressly because students would start losing balance, but instead of like repositioning the foot, they would, keep going, and then keep going to the fall because they thought that they could not relocate, they could not reposition their feet. And then I'll say, no, people, shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Like you can, like you're here with your feet, you can just this little adjustment here is the difference between discomfort and full balance, full access. Now we say expressly that in class to allow so people feel comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm.
As teachers now, Alisson, we have this very interesting thing to deal with where people take what we say very literally. Where the foot is where the foot has to stay the whole time.
You get shot
now,
if you move.
If you move that foot from that place, oh my God. So now we are saying, no, you can just do a little bit, you slide a little bit forward if you feel that you need more balance, just do that and you're good to go.
Yeah, treat it as an accent change. It's an accent. You're not changing the word. Please don't change the word. But an accent pronunciation is fine.
Yeah, you're adapting the volume, you are repositioning yourself in the chair to listen better. You're finding yourself a more comfortable place to listen better. If your body is uncomfortable about to lose balance, it's hard to listen. The other thing that Alisson mentioned that reminded me was this weekend, I was doing a beginner boot camp, and today was our second day. And there is this gentleman here that he was dancing in a way that I haven't seen someone dance Brazilian Zouk to in a long time, which is from the start, he had an approach that everything he does is small. It's small and comfortable. Very clear, the way transfers are clear. I feel the basics, I feel everything. It's very condensed. And it feels so much fun. It's so amazing. And reminded me of this gentleman that we had or have in Rio that followers really like to dance with them because they do things small, but very clear and very comfortable. And they happen to be older men, older gentlemen. This gentleman in Rio that would dance small and cozy, and followers really like to dance with them exactly because of the aspects of the contained dancer, the contained dance, but really comfortable and really clear. And that reminded me, it's a very clear aspect of adaptation, because in Rio, those guys, they were older people who were adapting the movements to a size that was comfortable to them. And they were doing all the things. They were just doing it smaller. The fact that they were doing it smaller, they could keep up with the speed. And it was really nice because they could dance really fast music, but the fact that they were small on the spot, they could do it all. It was so amazing. And then dancing with this leader here this weekend reminded me so much of that, and reminded me to tell them more often in class. Adapt the size of the movement to something that feels comfortable for you. It's not because we are doing this big, you have to do this big out in the jungle. We can do this big in class for you to train, but if out in the jungle you feel that it's more comfortable for you to stay small, stay small. And there will be so much people that are going to enjoy this dance, because the matter is not how big the dance is, but how comfortable it is and how clear it is, how easy it is to understand. So it's almost like a quiet conversation, but very easy to understand and very easy to listen. So these things that I mentioned remind me of those things.
That's right. And we hope that this episode has helped you in discovering something else that you can do instead of just thinking, I can't do this, this is not for me. This is an episode that we want to really make sure that everybody feels able and embraced by this dance. Because very often, a lot of people think that Brazilian Zouk is not for everybody, and that's absolutely not what we believe. And that's absolutely what we work hard for every day, every week to change. So yes, the dance on the Instagram and the demos is a different story. That's a show. But when it comes to social dancing on the floor, in the party, everybody should feel like they can do anything, whether it's something that comes naturally to them or something that they have to train. That's different for every person, but we hope that with this episode, we have given you some tips and some clarifications of what we think it is. So thank you very much for being here once again with us. Please follow us on Instagram and on YouTube as well to see some of the short versions that we're posting of each episode in case you don't have the time to watch the full episode. And we'll see you on the next episode, everybody. Thank you, thank you. Beijos, beijos, abraços. Ciao.
Ciao, everybody.